Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. My name is Jessica Owens. I'm a specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, and you are joining us for our November Complex Care webinar. Thank you all for being here today. We're super happy you could join us. We have a really great webinar in store for you all. I just want to take a moment to say happy Wednesday. Please feel free to share who you are and what county or agency you represent in the chat. And of course, as always, if you see a friend or a colleague, please say hello, reach out, say hi. And as people are logging on to today's webinar, we'll take a few moments to give those folks some time to log in and get situated. Sometimes we will share an icebreaker at the beginning of our presentation, but today I wanted to switch things up a little bit and share a story with you. So many of you know that November is Native American Heritage Month. It is important to acknowledge that our nation's history is intertwined with efforts to erase Indigenous people from their lands and their stories. However, Native American heritage is not only about what was taken, it is also about what has survived. The 2025 California Native American Heritage Day theme was walking in their footsteps, carrying forward the legacy of strength and sovereignty. This theme emphasized the importance of the resilience and leadership of Native American people, both historically and in the present day. So with that, I would like to share with you all that this summer, 30 Indigenous youth aged 13 to 21 years old joined together to kayak 310 miles of the Klamath River in celebration of all of the collaborative advocacy it took to make this river flow freely again for the first time in 100 years. And with that, I'm going to lean into my colleague Alicia to share a short video with you all this morning.
Here at the very tail end of the Klamath River, since it's been undammed, we're here with a few dozen Indigenous youth from throughout the Klamath River Basin, and we have been kind of training for the last couple of years to descend this river in a good way as one big unit.
You know, everyone in my family we've always lived by the river. Since time immemorial, that's where we have lived. It has been a fight against the dams for over 100 years, you know, and all of our families have been affected by the dams.
It was very, very evident through all the biological effects, like through the fish kills and the algal blooms in the rivers, that the dams were a huge detriment to not only like the flora and fauna of this area, but also the people. The salmon is one of our main sources of food, and only 2 weeks after the dams came out, we saw salmon returning to their spawning grounds they hadn't seen in 100 years.
Our ancestors would be proud because this is what they have been fighting for, you know? I kind of feel guilty, like I haven't done enough to be fighting, and now I get to have this relationship of joy. And I gotta remember, that's what our ancestors fought for. They fought for that so that we could feel this joy.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for sharing that video. And as you can see, Native nations are rebuilding, languages are being revived, and traditions are being reclaimed. And if any of you are interested in learning more about that incredible story, I'm going to share 2 links in the chat with you all. There are 2 different videos that are a little bit longer if you want to learn more about those youth and their journey. So once again, for those of you who are just joining, my name is Jessica. I am a public education specialist with the UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. and you are joining us for our November Complex Care webinar. This webinar is brought to you in partnership between UC Davis and the California Department of Social Services. Now, before we get started with our program, I have a few housekeeping items for you all. So we are recording this presentation today. I do have a few of my UC Davis colleagues. Well, I actually have a lot of my UC Davis colleagues on the call with me today. However, I have James Williams, Alicia, Alicia titled as IT, and also Geraldine Bordage on the call to help support. If any of you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat. We will be keeping an eye on the chat. And then I have a few other reminders for you all. If you would like to view today's presentation or any of our past webinars, you can do so on the link that Geraldine is going to share in the chat. In addition, if you are interested in receiving an attendance letter for today's webinar, we are going to be putting the link for that in the chat as well. And I also wanted to let you know that UC Davis offers child-specific complex care coaching. When every option feels exhausted, these sessions help teams identify new ways to move forward. And remember, there is hope for every youth whose life you touch. Complex care coaching helps social workers step back, re-energize, and reimagine the path forward. We do host these complex care coaching sessions twice monthly. I'm going to put the times and the link in the chat for you. And if you are interested in learning more, you can always reach out to us on our resource center at ucdavis.edu email. So once again, if you are here, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We always like to know what counties are represented in our audience. In addition, in order for us to get a clearer idea of who is all here today, we are going to drop a poll for you. So James, we're going to drop the complex care poll. What kind of organization are you with? So give us 1 minute and we will get that geared up for you. All right, folks, so please go ahead and take a moment to fill out that poll for us. Give us a clear understanding of this one is, what is your role? So within your organization, what kind of a role do you have? Awesome. Thank you all for taking a moment. And also, if you aren't able to access the poll for whatever reason, you can give us a better idea about your role in the chat as well. So we're going to leave the poll open for about 20 more seconds. Okay, we're doing pretty good. We have about 83% of the audience has answered our poll so far. Okay, James, let's go ahead and end it there. So just to give you an idea, yeah, you all can see the results of the poll there. A good representation across the board. Awesome. Thank you, James. And if we can drop our other poll to give us a better idea of what kinds of organizations are represented in our audience. Awesome. All right, that poll is queued up for you all. And this will help us get a better idea of the organizations you all represent today. All right, great job, everyone. Thank you all for your responses. Seeing lots of you joining the poll. We'll give you all about 20 more seconds or so. Okay, great job, everyone. We have about 85% of the audience. Okay, James, let's go ahead and end it. All right. So if you all can see the results of our poll today, lots of folks coming in from county CWS probation, behavioral health, or other county departments. So great to have everyone here in the room with us today. We have a really great webinar for you all, a really great presentation, some really incredible folks on today's call with us. So we are really, really excited. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off over into our program. So we are going to begin. The title of today's webinar is Reframing Complex Care, One System, One Family. I personally think today's discussion is going to help us keep sight of a deeper goal, helping youth feel connected, supported, and truly at home. When systems focus too narrowly on short-term stabilization, they risk overlooking a youth's deeper needs for belonging, connection, and continuity. Strengthening the relationships in a youth's life, especially during times of crisis, will help the family and natural supports stay connected and better equipped to sustain long-term well-being. Today, we will explore strategies for supporting youth with complex needs by centering the whole child and the whole family. So it's pretty exciting for today's webinar. We actually have a full house of Resource Center for Family Focused Practice specialists. And our first specialist who I'm going to call into the conversation today is Lizzie Dembose. Lizzie is a child welfare specialist and is going to be leading today's discussion with our other panel members. So come on in, Lizzie, welcome.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to those of you who I saw wave back. That warms my heart tremendously when we can be in a virtual space and feel like we are in the same room. So thank you for that. I appreciate it tremendously. Hello, everybody. I'm really delighted and happy to be here with you all, especially considering that I get to be among my peers and colleagues here at the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. I'm very excited for you all. So in addition to being the facilitator of today's discussion, I also had the honor of being able to coordinate this webinar and bring this vision to life. So before we jump into some of the panel discussions, I am going to set the framework a little bit and provide you a little bit of context as to how we got here today to talking about this topic, because I think it'll help orient you to the discussion that is about to ensue for the next little bit of time together. So this webinar really grew from two seeds. And the first seed is a nod and a thank you to all of you who continue to show up in this space month after month, because you all have been asking for more strategies and support in our evaluations to support youth and families, particularly in times of crisis or crisis-like moments. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is going to be geared towards that particular time in practice, right? There's many of those experiences that we have as we walk alongside youth and families. And so you'll notice today that a lot of the questions are prompted for our speakers to speak directly to that moment in time. And again, we heard you all. So thank you. And I hope that you feel that this webinar meets some of those needs that you've been requesting. The other thing I want to make a note of really quick too is that we are going to use the word crisis. It's on our slides, and our speakers may also be using this word today too. As we just saw, there is a rich mix of folks representing all different levels and roles as well as agencies. And I think it's important to know that we use this word differently depending on the role or agency that we work for. But for the purposes of today, when we are talking about crisis, we are talking about crisis-like situations. It is an umbrella term to capture all of the different things that could fall under that larger umbrella concept of a crisis. So it could be a true mental health or safety crisis, or it could be a crisis-like situation where things are heightened and escalated. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we are orienting into this conversation. The other thing that I want to call attention to is the second seed that was planted to bring this webinar to life. And as I was coordinating with our California Department of Social Services team and our UC Davis team about an idea for this month's webinar, I was sharing with them about the request that you all have been asking for this particular focus. And we were able to have a really great conversation, and that led to a really important reminder. When we describe youth as having complex care needs, we're not saying that the youth themselves is complex or that the youth themselves is the problem. Rather, we're naming the reality that this young person has had a range of needs across all of their life domains that have gone unmet, sometimes for years, and that they are receiving or have previously received services from a multitude of systems. And what is complex instead is not the child or the youth, right? But rather the web of systems that haven't yet been able to meet those needs in a coordinated and sustained way. So I can recall back on my practice, and I remember in moments of crisis or crisis-like situations where my focus would go narrowly on the short-term stabilization and short-term safety needs at the time, right? That's what we are being called to do in those moments for support and walking alongside families. And I can also recall at that time that I would lose focus of some of these longer term undercurrent needs that sustain that child or that youth throughout the lifespan of their life, right? So again, I think just highlighting that it's really important for us to reframe that the child is not the problem, right? To shift out of that language and begin to reframe and reimagine the ways in which we can look at the youth in those moments and their families, and think about ways that we can walk alongside them. The other thing that is really important to note really quick too is that in this same sort of vein is that we want to be able to help build resilient networks of support. So we want to be able to take care and tend to that child and youth's long-term undercurrent needs for belonging and connection and continuity, but we also want to be making sure that we're building resilient networks of support. And I feel like I'm in a room of people who wholeheartedly believe that and want to do that. So my hope is that today our panelists are able to shed a little bit of light for you all and the different perspectives that they hold in this work. We have 4 different speakers today, and they each hold a particular lens on this topic. And I'm very excited for you all to be exposed to the different ways in which they are going to speak about this particular conversation. And one of the things that I'm also hoping that may be true for you is that it allows you to also pick up the different rocks and look at them a lot of different ways, or look through a kaleidoscope and keep turning the kaleidoscope and keep looking at things in a different way so that we can all work together to transform and reimagine and reframe some of the ways in which we are practicing or our programs are standing as they are today. So with that, I am going to welcome in Rebecca Cox. She is our first presenter today. And hi, Rebecca. It's good to see you on this platform.
Hi, good morning. It's great to be here. We do
Awesome.
so many wraparound webinars. It's nice to get to jump and do this one. Excited.
Yes, thank you. So I'm gonna next, if you can move this slide, 2 slides, please. And Rebecca, as that is happening, before we jump into your questions, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, the work that you've done, and how long you've been in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning. I'm Rebecca Cox. I'm a wraparound specialist here at UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. I've been at UC Davis for 4 years now, just rolling up on that 4-year anniversary over Thanksgiving break. So it's kind of exciting to have been here for a while. I started out as a volunteer in wraparound, feels like a million years ago. So I won't give you the exact math, but I was 19 and in college and looking for some volunteer hours to try to get to grad school one day. And someone was like, "Hey, I think you'd really like this wraparound program." And I was like, "All right, cool, I'll try it." And I tried it and I loved it. And I've been with wraparound ever since. So after college, I went and did that. I went to go work one-on-one with the kiddos in wraparound, and then I just kept moving up for facilitator, clinician for a minute. And I went into supervision and then training and coaching full time. So lots and lots and lots of work of wraparound, and then dabbling around within that in therapy and a few other things. But I've always come back to just the wraparound work and being excited for the wraparound work. And I was in the field, it's been like 15 years of like actually formally working in wraparound now. It's about 15 years of that.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here. And the slide that we're looking at has the first couple of questions for you to dig into. And the first one being, can you give us an overview of the wraparound principles?
Ooh, you're going to quiz me on my principles in front of the world. All right, I love it. So wraparound has 10 principles. They're very similar to the principles you find in the integrated core practice model guide, right? And because of those ICPM principles were based off the wraparound principles. So the wraparound principles, we're talking about strength-based, individualized, finding natural supports, right? Persistence, that ongoing, we're going to do whatever it takes to get you to where you need to be. We're community based, so we live and work in the community. We connect our kids and families to the community. We believe the community has resources and strengths itself that can help stabilize a kid there, right? And we think long term, right? So we're thinking, what is the supports and needs they get long term, culturally relevant and respectful, right? So tying everything we do into the kids and families' unique culture. Family voice and choice, right? So putting kids and families at the center of what we do, and asking them, what do you need? What works for you? What are your preferences? What are your values? How do we line that our work up with that? And how do we make you guys the ultimate decision makers, right? Our job is to give you options, give you supports, but truly, truly listening and centering youth and families in our work in everything we do. We also, now that I've like said them all out of order, I kind of forgot where I was going. We're outcomes based, right? So another principle is outcomes based, looking at the goalpost. Why are we here? Where are we going? How do we get it? Wraparound doesn't care so much. Wraparound is very structured, and like we have activities, we have phases, we have a process that we follow. But at the end of the day, we're looking at what's the family vision, what's our mission, what's our goal for our time here. And we're always looking forward to that outcome based thing. So there's 10 principles of wraparound. If you want to see like the full list, we can drop a link in the chat. You can also Google 10 principles of wraparound and you'll get like 100 different results in Google, right? I think the big thing to know is just that these 10 principles of wraparound are what has guided the development of the integrated core practice model. It's what brought child and family teaming to California as a system, right? It was based off of that wraparound work. And we got these principles from a lot of really, really good people I think of them as like the original OG complex care social workers, right? There were social workers and clinicians back in the ideas for wraparound started in like the 60s, 70s, but it was really in the 80s when they were realizing that like, hey, locking kids up and keeping them in lockdown facilities really isn't working. We got to find a better way, right? And so they tapped these clinicians and these social workers to go out and work with the kids that no one wanted to work with. Go to that kid that was placed out of state in a lockdown facility and had been there for years and figure out a way to get them home, right? And that's exactly what these different clinicians and social workers did. They went in and they started asking, like, what do you need? What can we do? How do I think outside the box? There's a couple, I'll post some resources after I'm done talking, you can check it out. There's a couple of really cool ones. There's like, John Vandenberg has a video where he talks about working with a youth named Thomas, right? And Thomas is in a lockdown facility, and he talks about going into the lockdown facility as a young clinician, all confident, right? Like I've worked with so many kids and I've worked with everybody and I got this. And he walks into the lockdown facility, and for the first time ever, he's like actually scared to be in a room with this youth, right? He's like, oh, I got to get out of here. I'm going to get hurt. But he worked with Thomas and he was working on behalf of Alaska. So got him from an out of state lockdown facility back to Alaska and eventually got him stabilized with his mom, right? And what that meant to him and what that took. And then he started writing it down. Similarly, there's another rap OG champion named Carl Dennis. He's got a book out, and I'll post a link for that as well. And yeah, it's not a small man being that scared, right? So Carl Dennis talks about doing the same thing for some other kids where they're looking again, we're spending all of our time and resources and money sending our kids out of state, locking them down, and it's not working. There's no end game, there's no solution here, right? And not only that, their behaviors are getting worse, right? The more that we keep them in care, the worse their behaviors are. So he talks about, he's got a story in the beginning of his book about taking this kid, putting him back with his mom, and they're standing at the door, and like the mom's like, I don't want him. He's not coming back. I do not want him. There is no way. And he just, with that persistent kind of principle in mind, just like, well, what would it take? What if, right? So we're not saying we're doing it, but if we did, what would you need? And so she starts telling him different things. He goes like, I can do that. It's like, well, he'd have to be real tired at the end of the day. Well, I can do that. Let me call the football team. So he calls the community football team, the high school football team, and says, hey, I got a kid. I need you every day after school to run him until he's exhausted, right? And then after you're done and he comes home from practice, can any of the players come sit in the house with him, right? Can they come over, right? What else do you need? Well, we need 24/7 crisis. He's like, well, I can find a way. I'll figure out how to get you 24/7 crisis support, right? And so they just did that. And so what happened with Wraparound is they did this over and over and over again, where it was just people saying, how do we do this different? How do we think about what we know that what we're doing isn't working? How do we change it and how do we do something different? And then over time, they're like, wow, this is really working. We're seeing the results we want to see. Let's start writing it down. And then they started writing it down and refining it. And now we have the wraparound models we know today. And then from that wraparound model, we've gone, hey, this really works, right? When you do it well, when you center these principles, when you live and breathe by these principles, it really, really works. And so then we said, hey, let's bring that to the rest of the youth in care, right? And how do we get the rest of the youth in care to have the same experience of having principle-based work that says, whatever it takes, we got you, we can think about this. That was
Rebecca,
a lot. I need some water.
Yeah, take a sip of water. Thank you so much. I sit from the lens of a child welfare social worker. And what I appreciate most about what you're sharing right now is the principles, right? The kind of spirit of wraparound and where it came from. And even though I've not ever been in a wraparound team, there's things that I'm picking up and gleaning from you. And I know that this audience is mixed with all different folks. And so thank you for kind of giving us the lay of the land from a lens in which I think most folks can identify and relate to. So I appreciate that. And kind of with that same sentiment, can you talk to us a little bit about how agencies and caseworkers can balance short-term safety needs with long-term connection and well-being? I know Wraparound does this really well. And so if you can talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, that would be fantastic.
Yep. I think a lot of it just stems from that principle I mentioned about being outcomes-based. You're always looking at the end goal. And for Wraparound, it's really, you stabilize to the point of them being able to participate in the wraparound process, right? So what is it going to take to just keep you in a place where we can keep working on things? And how do we keep a guiding light? So we set up like a vision or a mission with the family that says, hey, our goal is to have you in this environment doing these kinds of things, feeling this kind of way, right? Broadly. And so then we keep that in mind. We're always working towards that sort of end game goal. And it really is coming back to that. So we see, I mean, it happens in wraparound too. You get a lot of crises, a lot of stuff happens, teams get off track, right? And you start flowing down these rabbit holes and we don't really get back. So it really is truly about thinking, what's the long-term goal here? And then looking at how do I address the short-term needs and especially short-term safety needs with any kind of natural community support that I can find, right? How do I take these safety needs are going to be there, right? For these kids and families, they're not going to go away overnight. We're looking at less intensity, fewer farther between, right? But how do I find ways for those safety needs to be addressed outside of this system? And how do I have that lens that this is normal? All families have crises. All youth are going to struggle at times in their life, right? So we're teaching them how to get it in the community instead of through us and keeping that as the focus.
I wish I had my microphone right here just to be like, mic drop.
I'm done logging out.
Thank you. I've got one more question. You can't quite log out
Absolutely.
yet. Next slide, please. So you've already kind of started to unpack this a little bit, and I'm hoping you can just kind of keep going down this thread a little bit and talk to us more about how supervisors can and agencies can reinforce these wraparound principles, whether a wraparound team is involved or not. So this is kind of speaking about the spirit of wraparound. Which might be, it was kind of a new idea for me to bring this concept in, but I think it's a really important one because, again, as you started to say, the principles of wraparound can be embodied whether a wraparound team is in place or not. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of talk to us a little bit about how to reinforce those principles, whether a wraparound team is involved or not in complex or high intensity moments, particularly, so that, like you just shared, that North Star, that family vision continues to be the guiding North Star for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is about first, you have to embody, you have to live and breathe the principles yourself as a supervisor. Because I want to acknowledge that this is actually hard to do, right? It's real easy to get sucked into just sort of solving the problems and forget the principles when that rubber hits the road, or we tell our staff to do it, but we don't do it ourselves. So I think it really is like whether you're using the wraparound principles, whether you're looking at the ICPM principles, right, of really like embodying those and being super familiar with those yourself and holding yourself accountable first, right? And then beyond that, you want to supervise to the principles, right? So we teach this in wraparound when we talk about when we talk to supervisors of you want to get your supervision out of like what the crisis of the week is, or addressing or talking about go with this family, do this service, go with this family, do this intervention, and have your supervisions be more focused on what is the family saying, what is your teaming process like, how is the overall bigger picture going, and giving your staff and the families the autonomy to have the other conversations together, right? So I'm checking in on like how's therapy going if they're in therapy or whatever, but I'm not dictating what's happening in that. I'm asking you, like, have you had the right conversations with your families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you as a team reached out? Are you working with your whole child and family team? Is everyone involved? How's the collaboration going, right? How is your connections to your communities? What does that look like? What do you think you need to get that done, right? So I'm looking more of those bigger, broader things. And I'm really empowering my staff who are working with the youth and families to have those other conversations directly with youth and families, right? And asking, again, just bringing those principles to life, having the conversation be about the principles, right? And it's hard to do, but it really does help with that. And the last thing, I'll bring it back to outcomes based one more time, is looking at that end goal. Your job as a supervisor is to always have the end in mind, right? So when your staff are like in it and they can't see it and they're struggling and they're like, oh, this is so hard, you're the one that gets to step out and say, yep, I got you. I know it's super hard. Here's the end goal. This is where we're going, right? How do we get to there? How do we forget about what's happening right now? We're not really forgetting about what's here. We're right now, right? We're addressing it. We're going to make sure, right? But how do I pull you out and make sure that you are keeping the end in mind and we are looking towards the end? Because that's how youth and families get better, right? Is looking at those bigger picture needs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So many nuggets that you just put out there for us. And the one thing that I'm taking away and I think is important to emphasize is that we all need somebody to support us in those moments to zoom out and to see the bigger picture, because it's very easy for us to, again, get into that tunnel vision when we are in it directly and feeling what the family is feeling, right? Because we're alongside them in those moments. So I think that that's a really wonderful reminder to all of us, and also emphasizes the importance of having a team alongside us in this work, whether a wraparound team is involved or not, right? Reinforcing this kind of idea of building out robust child and family teams of, yes, professionals, but also those natural supports for the family themselves. So thank you, Rebecca. Don't go anywhere. You can get off the stage for right now, but you're coming back. So thank you so much. And I feel like this is a great segue into T. Frazell. I'm going to welcome you upon this stage with me. And I think the spotlight will be happening in just a moment. So y'all should be able to see T in just a moment up here with me. There you are. T, this is a really great segue into kind of your lens and the way in which you see this work. But before we get too much into that, please introduce yourselves. What are you up to right now? And where have you been? How long have you been in this field?
Hi, Lizzie. Good to see you. And thanks for Rebecca for getting us started so powerfully. So good to see you all. So good to see so many familiar faces. As Lizzie said, I'm T. Frazell. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm a program specialist with the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, assigned to working on the Center for Excellence in Family Finding, Engagement, and Support. But getting here was, a bit of a winding path. After spending my 20s as a hairdresser, I then went back and finished my undergrad degree as a later older student. And after that, I went to work for a dual diagnosis group home where teens were placed mostly through juvenile probation. And they were all there because they were battling substance abuse. And so we were confronting all sorts of crises on a daily basis. But this was back in 2004, so it's a while ago. RAP was there, but still kind of early days. And then after that, I went to grad school and got my master's degree, and then spent the vast majority of the remaining career from the county child welfare perspective. So I was a social worker in a couple of Bay Area counties here in California. I was a supervisor. I left county work in the mid 20 teens and began coaching and developing curricula and training and consulting all across the state of California, primarily in a couple of key areas, one in anti-racist practice and the other in organizational culture and climate, and particularly leadership practices. So a lot of work that I've done leading up to here is really looking at a lot of these values, principles, and frameworks that really inhabit the spirit and soul of what the mission and vision of child welfare is and should be, and really looking at the things that get in the way of actually doing that. So from that lens, I'm super happy to be here and talk to you all about this.
Thank you so much, T. And can you share just really quickly, the Center for Excellence in Family Finding, Family Engagement, and Family Support, can you just share like one or two quick sentences for anybody who is not familiar with that center and the focus of that work really quick before we dive into your questions?
Well, kind of like Rebecca, I'm like, you're giving me a pop quiz here on the spot, so let's go. Center for Excellence in Family Finding, Engagement, and Support is really intended to keep kids connected to kin. We're really focused on how kids can be placed with kin, stay with kin, but more importantly, stay connected to the people who love them and know them. And that is basically what I'm going to talk about from my perspective today.
Thank you so much. And with that, can you talk to us a little bit about strategies that you have seen be successful in doing just that, keeping kin and the extended family needs and needs for connection at the center of team work and team conversations?
Well, with your permission, I'd love to start with the what gets in the way part, if that's
Go for it.
Because I think it's having spent about 20 years in child welfare, right? I know Rebecca said it's so hard. It's easy to say what we want to do, but it's hard to actually do it. And there's lots of reasons for that. Lots and lots of reasons for that. But one of the things that I think really has worked against keeping kin and extended family needs at the center of the team conversation is basically just the way we're trained to the way we do things. I've done a lot of research on the history of stranger foster care in the United States. And from the 1960s, we had the inception of the National Foster Parent Association, which is a great organization, no shade whatsoever. But we didn't actually get interested in the experience of kin caregivers until the late 90s, which has given stranger foster care a way head start on taking root in our, what we call at the Center for Excellence, the mental model, right? There's been a very established mental model in child welfare of stranger foster care being safer. stranger foster care being better. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I don't have the time to go into all the reasons for that. But what I will say is that the way in which I was trained as a child welfare worker, the way in which I supervised others, centered the needs of the system over the needs of the family. And so I think one of the best strategies that works to keep kid and extended family needs at the center of the team conversation is the principles of WRAP and the integrated core practice model that really kind of solidify and articulate the ways in which we really want to practice, which is not always in alignment with the ways that we do practice. So a couple of things that I think I've seen work really well. And I think it's really interesting, Rebecca, I really appreciate you taking us through the principles, because I think that in contrast to the principle of individualized plans, I think a lot of what has happened in child welfare is that we situate problems in the individual. And so we have this tension between individualized, tailored plans, which are great, we need that, but also a problem at the individualism in that this kid has these needs and these problems, and this is the way to fix it. And that starts with the way that we approach child safety, which is generally through removal. And that starts the whole process in motion. And so the solution is collective. And so the strategies that I think are really effective are collective strategies. When within our agency, particularly child welfare agencies, when we see this as a shared responsibility at all stages of the child welfare work, at all levels, that's super effective. And we know from the data that when agencies are focused on things like kinship, their outcomes are better in other measures. The data bears this out. So another piece is that similar, what also works really well is teaming across the entire system of care, because child welfare doesn't operate in isolation, and we have WRAP providers that can fill in a lot of gaps, but we also have partnerships with other systems like law enforcement, who in many jurisdictions partner with us to keep kids safe and remove them. So we need to be at tables talking with them about what our processes are like, and how are we reducing trauma for kids who are already experiencing trauma when they need a safe place to stay. And then lastly, the last thing I will say in terms of strategies that work to keep kid and extended family needs at the center of the conversation is true partnership with those we say we're trying to help. And so again, Rebecca, thank you for the principles. Family voice and choice really matters here, because it's not just lip service partnership. It's, are we actually hearing what they say they need and then empowering and advocating that path? In my experience, that is not the case. Now, granted, I've been out of the field for about 10 years, doing the consulting and coaching, but I also know that we are rapid cycling turnover in our workforce, and we're constantly training a new workforce. And so a lot of these principles need to be reinforced and remodeled. And so are we engaging in this trauma-informed way, not just with those that we're serving, but also with ourselves and with our teammates? So the thing I want to just kind of end on is this antidote to this individual diagnosis problem of like, complex care youth, right? If we really want to get to youth who have complex needs and have lots of different needs for care, I just want to pose the question to our colleagues here who are really interested in doing better. I just want to invite you to consider what's happened to asking what's happened to you.
Thanks, T. There's so many things percolating in my mind. Thank you for providing a lot of your own wisdom and expertise in this conversation. And I really appreciate you kind of circling back to where we sort of started today and reminding all of us the importance of language, the importance of our words in our work. And, you know, again, right, Rebecca, we started unpacking the need to help us kind of have somebody help us zoom out, because we do get tunnel visioned, whether we're directly with that family or we are in the program part, we are, you know, tunnel visioned on our particular work. And what a really nice thing to be able to do for our colleagues alongside us, to be able to be that person to zoom out and to pose some of those questions, to get us to slow down, to get us to really think meaningfully about the ways in which something like that is affecting the way in which we are showing up in this space. So T, thank you for really kind of honing in on that. I would love for you to kind of keep moving as we're keeping this focus on kin and extended family and the coordination and collaborative approach to supporting a child or a youth. And I'm really hoping that you can kind of roll up your sleeves here with us and dig in. And yep, it's happening. Thank you. And talk to us a little bit about, aside from the things that may get in the way, what are some things that we can do that you've seen done that we know is possible to engage our kin networks and extended family networks and community networks in crisis situations and throughout the life of a case, so that, again, we're helping build resilient networks of support that they themselves, as Rebecca talked about, can support that youth stabilize throughout their lifetime once systems are long and gone.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. One of the things that I will start off by saying is that in the data that we are looking at closely at the Center for Excellence in Family Engagement and Support, one of the proxies that we are using to flag youth who may have complex care needs is rapid cycling through placements. And so we look at youth with 4 or more placements, either in a 12 or 24-month period, as a proxy for a youth who may have more complex needs. Now, that's not always the case, right? Because there are some times where we have, you know, outliers or very young children for whatever reason who are cycling through who do not have these kinds of complex needs. But when we are taking a look at these kinds of, it calls to mind, like, what's happening? What's happening for this child, really, right? And so I think a lot of where, when I think about engaging kin, whether we're talking about early on at initial removal, whether we're talking about a crisis situation like a behavioral health flare-up or an imminent placement change need, or whether we're talking about ongoing engagement and support throughout the life of the case, I think that the biggest challenges often result from mismatch and mistiming of needs. And usually this is our needs systemically and the family and child's needs, right? So I think about my own experience as a child welfare worker, and I think about those days when I was in emergency response and I was placing children, whether it was a kin or a stranger. I remember sitting down and going over all of that placement paperwork. I also had the child with me. I also had all the child's belongings with me. I was in their living room. I was going through about 7 sheets of paper. I'm like, here on this like 11 by 14 piece of paper, I'm handwriting the after hours number if you have a crisis after hours when I'm not here. And it's a crapshoot who's actually going to pick up the phone and show up to help you. So a lot of the ways in which our system is set up to provide engagement and support is insufficient for the needs of the family. The family's not gone through foster parent training and like actively chosen to sign up to disrupt their life and bring a child into their home on a moment's notice. This is somebody who was not planning on a Tuesday to take possession of their 4-year-old nephew. So how are we set up to help them be ready for whatever the child needs at this particular moment? And our systems are quite overloaded. And so often what happens is we may make a call to a kid and they say, "Oh, that's a lot. I got to think about that." And then our system chugs along, and then it's a new worker, and then that name and number is lost in the file. And then we don't know that we should have called that person again to follow up to say, now, of course, things have changed. It's not consistent across the state, but these are the experiences that I had, and these are experiences I hear about from county practitioners. So we may not be providing what's needed at the moment that kin are ready. We may be providing what's needed for our system at the moment that our system is ready. And so these are the kinds of things that I'm really hoping that we can think about as we think about, as the Center for Excellence, we've been talking a lot about permanency and belonging. And so coming back to our WRAP principle of outcomes-based, if our approach has been that we keep kids safe by removing and disconnecting, perhaps the shift is, how can our better outcome be? How connected can this child be as a result of our intervention? And how much can we reinforce the connections they already have to the people that already love them? The last strategy is, we absolutely would be silly if we did not avail ourselves of the wisdom of lived experience, and parent and youth advocates and partners are one of the best ways to help fill the gap that our workforce experiences in being able to provide this kind of engagement and support.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There's many things that you included in your answer, and there's a couple threads I want to pick up and just bring back up to the surface really quick before we shift into our next speaker. And I think one of those things that you were sharing, T, is that sometimes our role is also an advocate. That we are the experts of the systems in which we work in, and we know how we can move our systems. So sometimes we need to leverage that advocacy to be able to help the systems move and orient and position in a way that better matches the needs of the family at that time. And the other thing that I heard you say, which again, kind of closing the loop of what we've talked about so far, is that you're correct. The needs of the family do not always align in time with our system needs and our timelines, right? So there's a lot of tension that is and friction that comes from that. And I believe one of the things that you were sharing is that never underestimate the circle back.
100%. Well said. Never underestimate the circle back, because you know what? Like, the first time I hear a thing, I might not be ready, but then give me a week or two and I might be like, you know what? Actually, I can do that. Right. And so I think that's great. Never underestimate the power of the circle back.
Great. Okay. And with that, Danae Lynch is going to join us on this stage. Thank you, T. Hang around because you're coming back. Danae, I am so excited to have you up here with me, ma'am. It's wonderful to have you. And I think that this is a great pivot into what you're about to share with us from the lens in which you look through. So can you talk to us about that lens? Who are you? What do you do? What are you doing currently? How long have you been in the field? Give us a little bit of breakdown.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Danae Lynch, and I am a peer partner wraparound specialist with the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. I, too, am rolling up on my 4th year here at the Resource Center. A few of us have grown up in this work together that are on the screen, so this is a really pleasant moment for me. I'm just tickled to be able to present alongside a few of my colleagues this morning. Yeah, I started out over, gosh, it's rolling into like the 18, 20 year mark, 17, somewhere around there. Residential treatment. I fell into that by accident. I didn't know what it was. I heard the word caregiver, or what was it? Childcare worker. I was like, oh, I can do that, you know. And I fell in love with residential treatment. I loved working alongside the teenage girls. I loved when the light bulb went on and they start working a program and they're mentoring other girls and they're doing, you know, all of their they're counseling and therapy and they're going to this and now they're working. And what I saw more often than not is when they went home, we would get that dubious call, 3 to 6 months later, that they'd fallen back into old behaviors and, wasn't going so well. And I always felt like we failed, but we sent them back to the same place where no change had happened. The babies had done all of this amazing work and home had stayed stagnant. And that was always very frustrating. I do have lived experience. Jacob Robert Shaw, he knows I use his entire name, so we don't have to worry about HIPAA. It is A-OK. I have full permission from all of my children to share all of our wonderful, glorious, messy mud. We navigated systems together, and I had an amazing wraparound team. We'll talk about that. I also became a parent partner when our organization said, hey, we're writing this RFP for this thing called wraparound. I'm like, oh, I've heard of that a little bit. Yeah. And because I'd had a team like, you would be a really good parent partner. I'm like, I kind of know what she does, but I'm really not quite sure. But okay. Became a parent partner supervisor. At one time, I had 21 parent partners underneath me. Awesome job for my organization for creating a parent partner structure. I also drink the wraparound water. I became the wraparound coach fidelitist. I became part of the Parent Partner Advisory Committee now that I co-chair with Roger DeLeon. We also started the Peer Hubs, which is a quarterly meeting where all of the peers across the state of California can come and get informed and connect and fellowship. My passion is uplifting the voice and the role of peers, both youth and parent partner across the state, to let everyone know the importance and value that peer partners have. And I just want youth and families to have a better experience behind me. So those coming up behind me have a better experience in systems. So that is my passion and my goal. So I'm really, really excited to talk with you all this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Well, we're just going to jump kind of right in, and T sort of queued you up. So when we're talking about peer partners, which, as you said, is a parent partner or a youth advocate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So kind of in that dual role as a parent partner and also a parent yourself who navigated the systems with your son, can you talk to us a little bit more about that wraparound team and any others that were brought alongside you at that time of your life, and share some things that they did to keep you engaged along the way, even when you didn't want to? And feeling supported and brought into the fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I had an amazing team. I will never forget my facilitator, Anita. Melinda was my parent partner. She was amazing. They were a fantastic team together. Prior, I felt like I was in adversarial relationships with school, with, my local police department. They knew our house, they knew our name. It's just at every turn and corner, I felt like it was just another system. We had our toe in the water with child welfare. And it was scary and it was irritating. And I'm going to tell you right now, I was not the problem. I was not the problem. That's the problem. It's okay. And I was tired. I had been dealing with Jacob's behavior for years. And by the time I had people walking through my front door, I felt like, they're all looking at me, that I was the one that was doing all of the things wrong. I'm like, look, people, he's been doing this for a real long time. Like, you are more than welcome to come live here and you take over. We had 52 holes punched in his bedroom wall. He was constantly posturing, cussing at his sister. She lived in fear. He had punched his dad in the face. He was 5150. We had the police. He was also engaging in getting into predicaments with friends of the family. We'd be at an event and he'd pop off, and now he's yelling at my friend's husband. I'm like, oh my, it was very tumultuous, And what my team did initially, and why I will always have a place in my heart for Melinda, my parent partner, is she listened. I wasn't put to blame. She understood because she'd been there. She knows what it's like to be tired. She knew what it's like from when I wasn't judged when I said, I cannot stand looking at him. I would have said, yes, please take him. He can absolutely go to stranger care. It was real hard. We as a family we were not healthy, right? And he was the easy out to look at because his behaviors were very, very extreme and scary. And I finally felt like, okay, I have somebody on my side that is absolutely going to listen. They tailor-made my team for us. They asked us questions and they found a behavioral specialist, family specialist, someone to partner with Jacob specifically based off of his likes and his behaviors. They also gave us, a second parent partner for my ex-husband. We were not in a healthy place. We were not communicating. We were not parenting together. So that was very helpful because I didn't have to navigate him and think I was dragging him alongside. The other thing is, like I said, I always felt like I was fighting a system, and for someone else to take that role and kind of take the lead to be able to have those conversations was amazing. And Anita, she was fantastic, my facilitator. So she came from a sports background and was a youth basketball coach. And she had a passion for children. She, in her spare time, coached young men basketball. And every time we started our family team meeting, we did an icebreaker. We played a game. And what I appreciated too, and we were just speaking about this the other day, is she preloaded me, because I was ready. I was ready, like, come in, let me tell you what he's done today. Right. And they said, look, we're always going to start. We got to get to know each other anyway. So building that rapport and building that trust and actually becoming a team was very important. And I began to value that as well. And we started looking forward to those, 10, 15 minutes that we did to maybe play like, heads up or, insert thing here. She was very creative. And I really appreciated that because at least what happened in those 15 minutes, my anxiety had reduced. I was still mad, but I wasn't as mad. And I'm ready to now have a conversation and listen. And that red fog that kind of goes over your face when you're ready, like you've got your armor's on, right? You're like, yeah, come on in. And that was very, very, very helpful. They were an amazing team. So that was some of the things that they did.
Thank you so much. I think, similar to where we started with Rebecca talking about kind of the spirit of how to apply some of these things, even if wraparound is not involved, I'm like, that's a genius idea, right? If the time and place is appropriate to play a game, to lighten the mood, to like break the ice in a way that lets everybody settle into this space. So I really love that. I'm a huge proponent of play also. So anytime we can play games, I'm down. But there's a few other things that I want to make sure that get brought back to the surface, Donna, because I think they're really important. The very first thing that you said about your adversarial relationships with systems.
Call it.
Oh, we have a coworker. I love that. I love coworkers joining us.
So fun. I love it.
Awesome.
Speaking of babies, precious babies. That your adversarial relationships with systems was the very first thing you remember happening to you once wraparound was in place is that they actually listened to you. And that reminds me of all of ours needs as human beings to be seen, heard, and validated. And that up until that point, it sounds like there was an absence or a void of being seen, heard, and validated by those systems, creating some adversarial relationship. Would that be correct to say?
100% correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing that I'm reminded of in this moment, as we're talking about, sort of youth with complex care needs and how we get tunnel visioned, and is this idea that we are not our behaviors or our choices. And it sounds like your team did a really, really, really good job helping you understand that and see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they took their time because I also have behaviors and choices, and it took a minute for Melinda to really have that conversation to be like, look, ma'am, I was a yeller. I was a cusser. I slammed things. I would threaten, those threats that go nowhere. And I did what I knew. My dad was kind of the same way. And I was like, I'm never going to be Bob Pirelli. Blah. And I literally was doing the same stuff my dad was doing unwillingly and not really knowing it. And when you're tired, you're really not in a place to be your best mom, your best self. And I love my children. I love my son. He's my person. He calls me every day. We have done amazing work. And to be able to slow down, to speed up and take the lead, they really embodied what us as peer partners do with caregivers and youth every day. Do for, do with, cheer on. I was not in a place where I could do these things on my own anymore. I was tired. I didn't have all the information. Again, it felt like I was fighting all of the time. And so they took that place in the beginning. And then they would walk alongside me. They'd give me homework. And now I'm the one communicating with the school or, I used to call him Officer Little. That's really not his name. I don't remember it anymore, but sorry, sir. And then they cheer me on, right? They weren't in there doing it. And so to follow that safety plan in the beginning was really, really helpful, creating it, right? And so because of the way I was operating as a mom and people often listen to how I say it, not really what I'm saying. And when I get escalated, I yell or the tears come out of my face because I'm mad and I'm not crying and I'm not upset. I'm just trying to give you my point. And often it's misunderstood and people are hearing how I'm saying it instead of what I'm saying. And so Jake was often very triggered by me raising my voice. And even when I'm happy, I get loud. It's the Italian comes out, And so to go through and talk about different strategies I could do to not trigger him. I'm like, why are we so worried about him? He's the kid. And she had a really open and honest conversation. She's like, look, Donna, if you don't change, how are you going to expect him to change? There's got to be we got to meet in the middle somehow. What are you going to do to help him be successful? Because for lack of better terms, he had special needs. He needed to be parented differently. He was triggered by yelling or being loud. Food was a ginormous trigger. If the kid was hungry, it was the worst day ever, right? If I did not have a snack in the car, it was World War III. And he would want to go to a fast food place. And I would say no, because I had to go to work. And then it was on, right? Gloves on, here we go. We're going to get a house and it is going to go down. And to unpack all of that and create a plan. And the first strategy was like, Donnie, we want you to walk up the stairs and go talk to him. So we get home, like, what do you want to eat? Let's make a snack. What do you want for dinner? I'm like, it is like 2 flights of stairs and I got to go around the corner. Like, he's lucky I'm making him some food, He was 15. Well, just try it. That was not my favorite. And finally, we nailed down, we can text each other, right? Who would have thought, right? But when you're in crisis, you don't think about these little strategies that could be helpful. I use a lot of punctuation. We learned not to use an exclamation point because then Jacob thought I was yelling. So it just had to be plain lowercase text. It couldn't be capitalized. And that was very successful. And again, Melinda would kind of walk me through it. And then she would cheer me on. And then after a while, this is where that sustainability comes in, is we would go into crisis and she'd say, hey, what does your safety plan say? What do you need to do? And it said, when it got real bad, go to Target, leave, get out of the house, disengage, because Target tells you what to buy. And it was also on my safety plan, noted, to not bring my wallet. I was not allowed to bring my wallet and not buy anything because I didn't want to spend any money. And I had to refer back to that. And it was very, very helpful. Also, Jacob had done anger management 3 times. once through the school district, once through through the it was through the police department, and then again through, I can't remember the system, 3 times. No, we were referred the 3rd time, right? He would need to go the 3rd time. And we were like, Jake's like, you're management again. And Anita heard that and went and had some conversations, right? And said, look, they've already done this twice. Takes time out of mom's day. She's got to drive in there. It's after school. It's in the afternoon. Jewel had dance. Jake had sports. Like, it was cumbersome. And we had a family friend that lived around the corner. He was a Marine sergeant. His name was Aaron. And Aaron had a similar childhood as Jacob. And Anita's like, look, what do you think about Aaron? How do you think he would do? I'm like, he'd be great. And he became Jacob's mentor, and that was very amazing. The other thing that they did is they protected our privacy. So as we were building that plan and getting natural supports and creating that sustainability, I was really afraid of letting friends, colleagues, other dance moms know what was actually happening inside my 4 walls. And they were like, look, if you're out in the field and you're working, who can go pick Jacob up if he's having a bad day? I'm like, I don't know. Well, who's available? And I had a girlfriend, Beth, who only worked 2 days a week. I'm like, look, she doesn't need to know what's going on. You know, you're embarrassed, right? You're embarrassed. You've got this guilt. You can't parent your children. And you don't want to be looked down on. And they coached me through a way to be like, hey, look, I might need some help. Are you willing? Do you have the time? Are you able to? And she loved Jake. Jake's amazing. He's amazing. And she did it. She would either have money. She would either have food in the car, money in the wallet, right? Because we'd Venmo, this and that. She knew everything to do. And I didn't have to give her all my dirty details to do it because she loved me at the time, you know? And that was very helpful. And also, I want to add one more thing. I know I'm taking a lot of time. Jake did not want his grandparents to know of his substance abuse. He was very ashamed and embarrassed about that. And so when they were invited in as part of our planning, that was one thing we omitted during that family team meeting, was to talk or have an update on how Jake was doing, because he was not willing or wanting to share that portion with them. And I've always appreciated that they were very protective of what and when we shared and how we were going to do these things without putting all of our business on blast, for lack of a better term.
Donna, thank you so much. You just rolled so naturally into this next group of questions. And I think you did a really beautiful job really laying out the menu of options. So thank you for using your own lived experience to be able
Absolutely.
to demonstrate what is possible. I do have a follow-up question because you shared a lot, and I am curious, how long did this process take place for you? Because I think that's a really important piece for us to remember as those walking alongside folks as just yourself. So can you talk to us about, like, how long was that process? Like,
I had an official wraparound team for about 8 months, and I had an unofficial wraparound team later on. They were amazing a few years later, because we had life got in the way, and we appreciated wraparound, we appreciated the process, and I made some calls to my organization. I said, look, we need some help. And so they unofficially wrapped us again, and that was amazing. And because we could have been system involved. So again, it's just, that was beautiful. And I know that doesn't happen, but because of where I was and where I worked and, you know, connections, that was very helpful. But yeah, you know, 8 months.
So 8 months with your official wraparound team?
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, some more time, which again, I think is really important, because I imagine, as you beautifully laid out, it didn't all click at first, but the team kept coming alongside you and listening and tweaking until you guys were able to get to some of those things that actually started working and making changes in your life.
Yeah. Fun fact, this is a great, just, you know, knowledge. We had Jacob back years later, like 3 or 4 years later, at my organization to talk about, you know, youth, system involved youth, and what they experienced, what they appreciated, what they learned. And, you know, we asked him, what do you think you needed back then? And he literally had no idea. He's like, I don't know. I have no idea. People ask me that all the time. I don't know what I needed. I have no idea. I couldn't even tell you why I was doing the things I was doing. It wasn't until he was 27 years old when his brain, like, I don't know, he matured some way. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, there's my boy. There he is, right? The one that I fell in love with that I had when he was a baby. Like it took him a minute, you know? And his episodes became further and farther between with less intensity over time. But he's never going to not have anger, impulsivity, ADHD. You know, he's not going to not be, oh gosh, what's his, I can't think of his educational diagnosis right now, but those things are never going away, right? I mean, insert traumatic brain injury from 4 years in the Army, right? Like the kid's got some challenges. He works a full-time job. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got 2 kids. Like he's done very well. But that's the other thing I learned from my team is that this is a lifelong journey. And when his wife came home, they got in an argument. And my first response was to get up and go intervene and try to insert myself and help Jacob. And I had to remember he is married now and he is no longer mine. He is hers. And I had the work to do. And that's something that my team took their time to help me unpack is what is my role in all of this dysfunction.
Well, and you already kind of started to roll into this last and final question that we have for you today. And I think you're doing a really beautiful job talking about why this is important. But I know you and I outside of the space today have had several conversations about what happens regardless of what the permanency plan or treatment plan goals are, that parents sometimes are left in the dust, especially when there is formal intervention and there is a short-term need for stabilization. The focus goes to looking at the resource parent, right? Or wherever that child is living or whoever's temporarily taking care of that child, if it's not the parents, to stabilize in that moment with that person, right? And that's equally as important. I do not mean to diminish or devalue that. However, one of the things that you and I have talked about is the aspect of not circling back or not bringing the parent into the fold at all to make sure that that parent continues to get the skills built. Because what you're talking about right now is that you as a parent, your son is 27 years old and you are still part of his network to help him through some of those challenges, right? It's changed a little bit, but had your team not worked with you to do that, that would have been a lot harder for you, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about like this particular piece and how what you've seen work so that teams can keep the focus and keep the parents engaged and involved regardless of what permanency is or regardless of what those treatment plan goals are?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny. He's 29 and Tamara, Rebecca, and Nancy was here earlier, but when he was 27 and I first started working here, we thought he was going to jail because he was outside the post office having a meltdown. And I was like, oh my gosh, because my PTSD doesn't go away either. It still affects me. And even though he was fine, I still have all of this residual stuff going on. So it is a journey. And I think that's another thing I just want to kind of highlight is just because it was 8 months doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're all fixed and we've waved the magic wand and my family is going to be golden. We're going to skip through the meadow together. There's still going to be challenges. And because my team taught me how to disclose appropriately, I had so much support in that day, years later. As a parent partner, I had the privilege of working with both resource families and caregivers, biological, insert caregiver here, kinship, right? Whoop. And I often saw that we would prioritize the resource parent, which is awesome because they're the ones currently working and housing and taking care of that child. And you have somebody who has had them their whole life so far and has all of this beautiful, historical, loving knowledge about that baby. And potentially our goal might be to send them home. And we absolutely disregard that parent and don't bring them in because we're very protective of the resource family. And I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but this happens, right? We want to keep placement. We want to keep the placement. We want to make sure resource parent feels comfortable. We're supporting them. Yes, and remember I said Anita does fun games, right? How do we build a team to where both parents who are parenting, right, have equal access to the team, to the knowledge, to the information? Because what happens is the baby gets caught in the middle, right? So if there are rules and expectations in one house and they get to go visit the other, and there's different rules and expectations, and we're not talking, who is going to be confused?
Mm.
The baby, right? And we expect children to do things that grown adults can't do. Regulate their emotions, have appropriate, communication skills. Tell us how you feel. What's your number on this chart, right? Grown adults can't do that, especially when you're, under a magnifying glass and say it now, we're in a team meeting, we want to know. And it could potentially be a setup, right? If we're not talking and we're not taking a full history and account of everything that's happening and all of the dynamics, we're not doing a full service to the youth and the family. And parents should be, this is something that also happened with mine. Jake was going to therapy. I had no idea what they were talking about. I think I found out about his ADHD, impulsivity. They were throwing out bipolar. They threw out borderline. I'm like, what? And the therapist was just like, giving me a little bit of education, but I'm like, is that a diagnosis? Like, what's happening? I was so confused, And if we don't know, it creates this, like, I had this feeling of, I was bitter, why don't I know? Why isn't anybody telling me? And we don't want to unintentionally create any kind of adversarial dynamics within teaming. And we want to bring everybody in because everyone is important, regardless of where they're going to land at the end of the day. And kids love their parents and parents love their kids. And how are we going to keep that connection, whatever that connection looks like? Yeah.
Wow. You have just been phenomenal in sharing all of your wisdom and experience. And I thank you tremendously for tying all of this together. There's many threads that you picked up between what Rebecca and T have shared. And you also just cracked the door into our final, least but not last, presenter. So I'm going to kind of shift us into some questions with Ms. Tamara Trejos. And I'm going to thank you, Donna, for your time. And we'll see you back here in just a few moments. So I want to welcome Tamara onto the stage and platform with me. Hello.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you here with me. Donna, crack the door for some of the things that you're going to be talking to us about. But before we get there, can you please share a little bit about yourself, what you're up to right now, where you've been in your career, and how long you've been around the field for?
Yes, sure. Happy to. But first, I'd like to say I probably should have absolutely refused to go after John A., right? Because, and just to take a quick moment to acknowledge your vulnerability and your bravery and your complete authenticity and how you catalyst all of what you have, I don't want to say gone through, but has been your journey into making sure that the families come behind you have a strong, powerful, and improved experience. And the way that you show up in your life and here at UC Davis and in the community for child welfare and wraparound is never short of perfection. And so I just want to appreciate you for a minute. I am not as amazing as Donna. So my name is Tamara Trejos. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and how I got there is a little bit of a journey as well. Like T, I started out of high school as a hairstylist, and if you go to your hairstylist, you realize that there is a therapeutic component to go to that. And when I no longer could do hair anymore, I kind of wandered into therapeutic services by starting at a non-public school, working as a student assistant, teacher assistant in the classroom. And that was my first exposure to what 20 years ago now, which is just mind blowing to me that number. They call them at-risk youth, right? So at-risk youth. And I remember asking, at risk of what? What are we at risk of? And what it was is systems. They were at risk of navigating systems, the child welfare system, mental health system, special education, juvenile justice, like the four main systems for children. And I just fell in love with those kids in that elementary, basically 1st through 5th grade combined non-public school classroom. And I decided I need to go to school. I want to help. I just want to figure out how to help. And if you work in mental health, you need to have a degree, really. So I started that journey. All along the way, I worked in the non-public school. I worked in a residential. I worked and helped develop a independent living program for foster youth, ages the 16 to 22. I have practice as a clinician, and I also have ran wraparound programs that were contracted by child welfare, probation, Kaiser, and the school districts. So a lot of different lenses and providing wraparound and making some adjustments here and there. And more recently, this last year, I've been a specialist with UC Davis in the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice. But I think that my strongest qualification is that I am a mom of 2 neurospicy kids who are now adults. So I've navigated quite a few systems myself, and have that experience as well in supporting my kids. And now as an adult as they are adults trying to figure out how to navigate those systems, because that's also very different.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Tamara. I know that you look through the work that you do with all of those different lenses. And so feel free to pull from any of that experiences that feels right in your answers. A lot of these questions are kind of more geared towards speaking to the role of the clinician. But similar to Danae, you carry so much other experience, lived experience that informs the way in which you look at this work and informs the way in which you come alongside folks. So let's just go ahead and kind of open this up with, Danae started talking about her treatment plan and the role of the therapist and in her personal life, and cracking this door for this particular question, which is from that role of and the perspective of a clinician. What are some of those ways that you have seen your others or yourself individually do to keep treatment plans connected to the youth and families kind of voice and culture, and not just that individual diagnosis or that individual behavior, like keeping that more kind of zoomed out lens? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So it makes me think of like comparing what we're taught in our clinical programs as LMFTs, LPCCs, LCSWs, is there's this, you're kind of like working one-on-one with a child, a person and you imagine this office, and we now are in these very collaborative community-based spaces, and we are called into as clinicians to be part of teams, which in our programs is not discussed. What is discussed is, how to diagnose, what is prognosis, what is your treatment plan, and you develop that by yourself, and you're taught to develop that by yourself. So I think things that would be new for people working with clinicians, and also for clinicians to be more aware of, is what does that look like in a teaming space? And even teaming with, say, not just the child in front of you in the office, but the parent, the caregiver sitting outside waiting. How do you incorporate them plus this larger team? And I think kind of going off of what Danae shared as her experience of being these diagnostic terms being thrown around and not understanding, like, what does that mean? and the impact that hearing those have on the caregiver. Because I've had the experience of being a parent receiving diagnosis about my child. And so as a parent, my reaction is, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? How did I do this to my kid? And so that's kind of like knowing from a clinician can know, and a team can know that a parent hearing this information for the first time might be living there in that moment, and hearing Charlie Brown's teacher from everything you're saying after that, right? Like that's what they hear, because they're now buzzing in their ears, inwardly focused, facing blame and shame, and probably are going to need a minute and more support hearing what you are saying about their child's diagnosis or behavior. And so what you can do to help support delivering that message is take into consideration what you know about their culture. What do you know about the family? What can you do to use family-friendly language and not be overly focused on diagnosis, prognosis, pathology? Because as a clinician, as a diagnosing clinician, that's what we're trained to do. And then we go from there on this plan that we've developed by ourselves. And then we're telling families and children and adults, this is how I'm treating you. And the shift is, this is what I am seeing. What are you feeling about that? What does this say to you? What are your thoughts about this? What are some things that sound like could be helpful moving forward? So I guess what I'm trying to say overall is it's a shared ownership of developing a treatment plan. You want to infuse cultural respect and responsiveness into that. Translate your clinical language into, family friendly and family meaning what does that sound like to them? What language are they using, and incorporate that. Don't stay super focused on what's wrong. Build in outcome based and identify strengths and share how strengths not only balance what you maybe have identified as a diagnosis or behavior, but how they can be infused into supporting that or correcting that.
Tamara, thank you so much. You shared a lot of really amazing nuggets. And one of the things that I want to pick up and bring to the top here is just recalling from my days as a child welfare social worker. I worked with both clinicians that were private, working out of their own private practice, and clinicians working in wraparound teams, and clinicians working from behavioral health. It was kind of a multitude, right? And what I really love about what you just shared is, again, kind of similar to what is possible, right? Because I know, particularly with my clinicians that I was working alongside from their own private practice, I was able to bring some of these examples in. And I love that you just brought some of those examples in to say, here is maybe what's possible. Like, how can you support some of this, right? Like leveraging that principle and that belief around teaming and a coordinated collective effort to support this family. So thank you for demonstrating so well some different ways that this can be approached, and how the role of the clinician can be leveraged when we're talking about building out teams to support, and particularly teams that may be working with a therapist practicing in their own private practice. Is there anything else percolating before we shift into the next question?
Yeah, I would say that what I've experienced, as that third party, like the wraparound, and maybe we are navigating a child and family team, a CFT meeting, and there is a community-based therapist there, and the community-based therapist might look like they're not cooperative, and they're not sharing, or they're not answering the question, or the the facilitator of the meeting is trying to ask a question in a different way, and it seems like the clinician is like avoiding or resistant. And I just kind of want to level set that by saying those clinicians that are brought in and they are private and insurance based, this teaming space is new and nuanced for them. And it's again, just kind of underlying, it's not really covered in their training unless it's post their graduate and they get exposure to it through their practicum and getting their clinical hours before they sit for their exam. So it just think of them as you're bringing another person to the table where you kind of share ideas. You make sure that you create a safe space for them and that you understand that they're not being difficult or resistant or hesitant. Another barrier too is depending on who they're working for, coming to your meeting might not be billable. And that can be problematic, right? So if they're private based, a lot of times they will be easier. Like they can say, I will put it in the schedule and, and they'll come and they're not worried about that. But if they're working for an agency, then they might be struggling with, can I attend this meeting and it's not billable, like looking at that. So there's a lot of pieces that we kind of aren't thinking about when we're thinking about barriers for clinicians.
Yeah, and before we kind of jump into the other barrier around confidentiality, thank you for naming that. And I really love your reframe of thinking about this individual as bringing them into this team as you would anybody else. Yes, they are a professional, and also their degrees of exposure to teaming is very limited. And I know that for me, that was a little bit, it took me a minute as a social worker to wrap my head around and to better orient to how do we work through this? So thank you for very plainly stating the importance of a simple strategy to treat them as if they are anybody else brand new to a teaming experience. So appreciate that. And on this kind of same sentiment around barriers, let's keep going and let's talk about this thing, confidentiality here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So confidentiality, let me just share that it is the main focus of of training when you're in your graduate program to be licensed in any of the mental health fields. It's all about confidentiality. And so to the point to where they have you so fearful about breaking and breaching confidentiality because you're going to get sued, you're going to lose your license, you will not be able to practice. So that is a huge barrier in the space of teaming, is erring on the side of caution, which is encouraged for clinicians. And there are some pieces of, let me just say, so we also operate out of law and ethics. So there's what's law tells us, and then what does ethics guide us to that clinicians follow. And so I have a couple of nuggets that for you, and I didn't want to misrepresent them. And so I will drop them in the chat. There's some documents that I will put in there for you. But I just want to note that in 2022, an all-county letter came out. It is ACL 2273, and it speaks to child and family teaming and clinical support, among some other things. But there is a lot covered in that ACL that speaks to the limits of confidentiality. That is great for clinicians to review because it covers some of the items that are pointed out in legalities, like there's a health code, we have a family code, we have a WIC section that all speak to when it is appropriate for teaming and sharing and to what level and degree of sharing items. And that includes when there is a release of information present and when there is not. and how we navigate that. Because sometimes what can be very confusing in child welfare system is who is the right person to sign that ROI. It's not always really clear once child welfare becomes involved. And for clinicians, without having some general law and ethical guidance that is like concrete and written, we err on the side of caution. And so we do not collaborate at all to keep confidentiality and also to keep our licenses, because we want to be able to keep practicing and helping families. So just some quick overalls is, yeah, and I will totally drop the ACL in the chat. It was 2273 from August 2022, but I have the PDF and I will put it in the chat. There's also a, I think it's the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, CAMFT. They have a whole legal section who writes articles that speak to law and ethics for clinicians. And one of their like probably most cited article, I believe from 2014, is confidentiality and its exceptions, including the U.S. Patriot Act. I have a copy of that article I can drop for you. That speaks a lot to like the therapist's responsibilities for privilege of information and sharing in these teaming spaces. And then I have the excerpts that I can drop for you of the WIC code from 16501. It speaks really clearly about what it means as a clinician to be on a child and family team and identifying what that means. They give a really beautiful description about how it's a group of individuals who convene through a placing agency. So it's speaking to child welfare being involved and what levels of confidentiality and things that you can share. What I would encourage you in practice as a clinician, as somebody who's provided clinical supervision, and as a mother who has had children navigating systems and have had to sit feeling very naked with information being shared, is speak to the person who you're trying to protect. Ask them not only, can I share this? Will you sign this legal document? But having a candid, genuine, authentic conversation with them about what would sharing this information help? Who are we sharing this with and how can they help? Who are we not sharing this with because how could that harm? And Danae gave a beautiful example of that. Her family was okay with discussing and sharing Jacob Robert Shaw's, struggle with addiction, but not when grandparents were there. And that was honored. And so that's also those nuances of sharing confidentiality in those spaces.
Tamara, thank you so much. That last thing that you just said really landed for me around speak to the person whose privacy you're trying to protect. So I want to say that one more time because I feel like that's pretty profound. And your advice and suggestion was to speak to the person whose privacy you were trying to protect. And that feels like a connective thread to what we've been talking about this whole entire last hour and 45 minutes together about this empathetic and connected approach, yes, also, but making sure that we are not narrowly focusing in and that we are continuing to pull everybody in and to, regardless of who they are, regardless of their role in the family or professional, and to make sure that we are having a collaborative, coordinated approach and conversations and services. And the last thing I really would love for you to kind of continue to speak to, I'm going to have you kind of roll into this as I ask my other presenters to come back on because we're going to finish with the last question. But while that's happening, can you also talk to us, and Danae started to talk about this too, how you, as the role of clinician, can continue to support this long-term wellness and progress, even in moments of crisis or losing hope or feeling naked because all of your stuff is on the table and you're buried in shame as a parent. Can you speak to that a little bit before we roll into our last question today?
Yes, I will. And I may be speaking to this a little bit with both hats on, as a recipient and also as a provider. One is crisis does not equal failure. It's clues. Crisis is clues. Crisis can be clues to the underlying needs. It can be a clue that our plan is not working and that it needs to be visited and revised. It can be a clue that our diagnosis is not correct. It can be a clue that the medication is not correct. It can be a clue that I'm telling you something with my words, but I'm really showing you with my actions. Crisis does not equal failure, it's clues. And I think that that's really important because whether you are a clinician, whether you are a social worker, whether you are some kind of provider, you come along with families, is to stay strength-based and not problem-focused. We want to look at outcomes and understand and support the family that in knowing that this is a journey and that your path along the journey is going to be full of two levels of stairs and going around the corner to now we've got roller skates on and we're just cruising right down the road, until my roller skate comes untied and it gets bound up in the wheel. There's not fault, there's just facts. And the facts are there's life, there's instances, and there's going to be bumps, there's going to be bruises, and all along the way is progress. I think that game Chutes and Ladders gets us ready for that growing up. And it's sometimes a really great game to bring in as a reminder and to kind of facilitate these conversations with families. I think that clinicians can reframe setbacks. I think they're great at modeling regulation. I think that everybody on the team has those opportunities. And then I think one thing that I would share as a parent who's experienced being a recipient too is wraparound and ICPM is like, let's start with positives. And you might have shown up and I was ready to sign the paperwork for my child to be like shipped off, right? And you want me to come up with something positive. I think that if you can read that moment and still look for something positive by maybe asking to uplift a hope moment, you can shift that energy, because I'm not going to be able to come up with something positive, and that kind of sets a bad tone if I'm not going to be able to in that moment, but I might be able to come up with a hope moment for you. Maybe you can reflect back to me our strength. What have you reflected and seen positive for me as a strength or in my child or us as a family recently? Because I don't have the ability or capacity to do that. And I think that if we keep everybody looking at the end goal by visiting our mission statements and the other one, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words right now because it's a little emotional speaking from a personal perspective too. But I think that is what's helpful, is to keep us looking at the goalpost.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for just dropping all the mics and nuggets. I see the chat going off as well too responding so positively to some of those quick and easy things that you dropped in your share. And thank you for your vulnerability. And again, just reminding us to something T shared is that we sometimes need to step into the role of advocates to move systems in a way that meets parents and families and children where they're at, instead of trying to force them to meet us where we're at because of our timeframes and our things that we're needing. So we are winding down in the last few moments of this webinar, but I really would love for all of our presenters, keeping time in mind, to share any last thing that you would like to share, whether it's related to this question about where you see systems unintentionally focused too narrowly, and the impact this has on families and youth, or just anything that you want to lift up before we start to wind down and move on to other things in our day. So I'm going to start back up at the top, and I'm going to ask Rebecca to come on in and kick us off, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Although I was enjoying like soaking it in. You guys, the rest of you did amazing. That was great. I wrote down a thought while I was listening to my peers over here. And it's something that's resonated with me, I think, this entire time I've worked in wraparound. And it's really just often the things that children need when they're in crisis are the very things that we take away, right? When kids are struggling and their behaviors are super loud and they're having a really hard time, they're screaming at us, man, I need an outlet. I need love. I need connection. I need a sport. I need fun. I need to do well at school. I need friends, right? And I think about what's worked for the kids that I've worked with, and it's rarely just the therapy or just this formal intervention. It's never removal, right? It's always those things that are like any other kid needs and has and wants, right? And so I think just moving forward, asking ourselves continuously, how do we make the things that kids need the solution rather than that thing that they can have when everything gets better, right? How do we make that the solution to their needs?
Come on, T.
That's super powerful. I love that, Rebecca. And I too have just been really enjoying soaking up all of the sharing and learning. And I'm super struck by the comment in the chat about as a parent who received wraparound, being asked what was needed, but not provided with ideas and feeling overwhelmed. And I love this metaphor of like being asked to order in a restaurant, not being given a menu. That's beautiful. So thank you, Ravon, for sharing that. That's incredible. Yeah, I think the thing that I'm going to bring it back to in terms of unintentionally focusing too narrowly on short-term stabilization is really upstream of kind of system of care wraparound involvement from my perspective. Like wraparound involvement was like you had a kid in care, a kid had been in care for a long time, they had a lot of behaviors, therefore throw wraparound at it, right? And the counties that I worked in didn't have like super robust wrap programs. So it was kind of this like secret thing that like some kids got and other kids didn't. It was just like you had to like knock on a door like a speakeasy to get wraparound. So I think one of the things from my perspective as a child welfare serving professional, the unintentional narrow focus on short-term stabilization when danger is present has historically been removal and disconnection. And that narrow focus on safety stabilization also gets reinforced by a growing emphasis as I was exiting county work on placement stability. And so if the response to crisis is removal and disconnection, and then the secondary response is now we're going to maintain that, where's kin? Where's connection? Where's the child's sense of belonging? Where's the child's sense of continuity, like Rebecca's pointing to? The very thing that child needs, that's the very thing we often don't give them. And our first placement with kin rates in the state of California as a whole is below 40%. So I think one of the things that we can really be focusing on when we're thinking about stabilizing children from danger is who loves them, who can step into the breach, even if it's not a placement. How robustly can we hold that network together for and with the child and family to help make sure that those healing connections, the potential for healing connections, are not removed?
It's so crazy just being in the presence of so much passion, knowledge, power. I am always in awe of all of you. So thank you for letting me share this space. My final thought is it is really easy to humanize the baby. Very easy. Things are often happening to them. And it's very difficult to humanize and empathize with the caregiver. And when we can slow down to speed up to learn what they went through as a child, how they were parented, what they went through, their history, right? What have they experienced in their life that brought them to this moment, to have a better level of understanding on how to work one-on-one and individually with them is so powerful. Also, peer partners, youth advocates, parent partners, get them, use them, work with them. They are the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and it's really going to be a integral part of teaming if you have access and ability. And if you don't, we've got technical assistance and you can reach out and we can help you.
Thanks, Donnie. Tamara, come on in. Do you have any final thoughts?
Just that thank you, honestly, Lizzie, for creating this space for us to share and speak on this and to try and broaden our reach and increase understanding and compassion. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters. We are going to launch a poll so that we can capture your feedback real time. We do listen, we do read, we do take it into consideration. So you'll see that pop up on your screen. And I just have a huge amount of gratitude. I love working alongside my peers here at the RCFFP and in general at the our UC Davis Human Services team. We are passionate, we are dedicated, we are committed, and we really love what we do. And thank you all, everybody, for showing up in this space today, month after month. And again, thank you to our partners at the California Department of Social Services. We wouldn't be here without you. Some of you are in the room, so thank you so much for all of your ongoing support. And if you do have additional questions, we didn't get time for that today. I apologize. It is in the slide deck. There's a couple emails that you can reach out to that are connected to the California Department of Social Services, and we can get you some help. We've got a lot on our team. Jessica, I'm going to pass it over to you for any final thoughts or closing. Thank you all.
Final thoughts in closing are that everyone that spoke today, our panelists and our facilitator, Lizzie, you all did a beautiful, amazing job just connecting with your own experience and connecting with everyone who is in our audience today. So thank you to each one of you for being here. You all did such a great job today. And yeah, just to reiterate what Lizzie said, if you do have a moment, please take a moment to fill out our evaluation. We do greatly appreciate your feedback. And we look forward to seeing you all here again next month. Our link where you can access the recording for today's webinar is also the same link where you'll be able to register for next month's webinar. So great to see you all and to have you all here with us today. And with that, we hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Take care, everyone.